What's up, lore masters? One of the aspects of the Xindi War that was done exceptionally well was showing how absolutely desperate the situation could get. Often, Archer and his crew were either in a no-win situation, or there were some instances where the captain would make what may have been the right choice, but wasn't the moral one. As we continue with the Xindi War arc, the next significant event is found in the episode Similitude, where the chief engineer, Trip, is hurt and goes into a coma. The NX-01 Enterprise is, of course, stuck in a place of doom where it will be destroyed soon if they can't get the engines online. Nothing new there. However, there is hope. Dr. Phlox has a Lacerian desert larvae. When implanted with another species' DNA, it clones the person effectively. Makes a perfect copy. The idea would be to clone Trip and then use the neural tissue from the clone to fix the original so that he will live. The clone's life cycle is normally 15 days, so it won't be around forever, and there won't be any pain from the procedure. And again, the symbiote will live its full lifespan. This is an interesting situation. As always, I try to be self-aware when I take a look at things like this and do self-checks in order to be a better person. On spec, I don't hate this plan. I'm uncomfortable with it. They are growing a life to harvest organs and then let it die. However, right now, that person will grow, have a normal life, and not be impacted. Well, normal life for a symbiote. It does make me question why, if in the 21st century we have the ability to use stem cells to help create or repair pieces of tissue at the moment, they can't just do that on Enterprise, but it's whatever. The situation they are doing with this clone, also known as Sim, is something that I think is morally gray but may not be in the wrong. Again, they believe they are growing a person who will experience their full life and have an operation that won't hurt them. If the crew doesn't do this, that life won't exist at all, so it comes down to personal preference. If you'd want to be born and allowed to live your life, ultimately to save someone else, and then die really quickly. I don't know that I would choose the life that Sim went through, even if everything had gone to plan, versus non-existence. But that is a subjective choice. I think many people would prefer to exist versus just not exist at all, so I don't judge it too harshly. I also don't think this is currently on the scale of decisions made by other captains, like when Picard set up a buoy in Identity Crisis, effectively ending that species, when Janeway killed Tuvix, or when Sisko bombed an entire planet of defenseless people in For the Uniform. The fate of the Earth is in the balance, and the natural life cycle of a creature is barely inconvenienced. So again, to reiterate, they create clone Trip and let him grow. Arguably, they are making him work on the Enterprise, but as he begins to get older, he gets the memories from Tucker's life. Yeah. And so I would guess this is something he'd want to be doing. Technically, he's not forced to do it if it's what he loves. However, that gets us to where the complications begin and why this is included in the Xindi War arc. Dr. Phlox discovers that the operation that they thought would not harm the newly created clone, now known as Sim as I've discussed, is going to kill him. And this is where things get real. The show presents it like they need Trip in order for the overall mission to succeed. And this entire situation is honestly more complex. It's not just one person must die in order for the other to live, but the fate of all humanity is in the balance. But that brings up an interesting question, one I think Archer and Phlox would ask themselves. How many lives are worth sacrificing for the entire species? One person for an entire civilization seems easy, but how many lives before it becomes not worth it? If the entire civilization is going to be destroyed unless they get rid of a certain percentage of the population, what's the stopping point for that percentage? Is it okay for 90% of a species' lifetime be cut short to save the other 10%? Should 95% be slaughtered? What if it takes millions of lives to die early so that only 5 people can live their full lifetime? If that's too many people dying, why are the 5 people's lives suddenly worth less than if it was 10% of the population? What makes hundreds of thousands of people any more important than the 5? If you argue that it is to preserve the species, then is a civilization that is willing to sacrifice anywhere from 1 person to 90% of their own people to stay alive worth saving? I would also expect everyone who thinks allowing mass genocide to save the entire species is okay to be rooting for the bad guys when they create bunkers and other shows and let everyone else suffer. Also, for humans, it only takes 160 people to carry on a civilization as normal to ensure that things continue without genetic issue. So are we willing to cut it down to that small of a number? And again, what if we could only save 150 people? Then does everyone die? I know this feels like a tangent and not related to Star Trek, but it is no small matter that Phlox and Archer are having to deal with, and I love that they take it very seriously. To their credit, they even talk it through with Sim so he's informed and can give his thoughts. And hell, when Sim states that he only has a few days left anyway, so who cares, Archer says, "That's not how we see it." At this point, I truly believe that Archer is being one of the best captains we've ever seen. He is better than both Janeway and Sisko in the comparable situations. He's talking with the person and walking through the choices and the consequences. However, the situation gets more complicated. Sim brings up a possibility where an enzyme that was created by an extremist group could extend his life, and so Trip surviving isn't necessary. One of the problems with this is that the enzyme is untested. There is some evidence that it works, but there's no guarantee. It's not a sure thing. And they won't know if the enzyme works until it's too late and both Sim and Trip may die. One of the very human aspects of Archer is his response to all of this. He orders Sim to go through with the operation. He's going to force him to do it, or at least he states he will. He says this because he wants to save Trip. He wants his friend back. He needs to have him back. Now, Archer previously did state that if they weren't in the Expanse under the situation that they are, he might not do any of this. But that's not where they are. That's not the situation. However, even if the mission is absolutely critical, part of Archer is choosing Trip over Sim, because he likes Trip more. Now, to be clear, and just to be honest, I don't think that was the only reason. I do believe Archer was ultimately doing it because of the mission. We even see it at the end of the episode where Archer says that part of why he is forcing Sim to do this is for Sim's sister. Looking at the episode proper, the only real issue I have with the writing is that Archer is given an out. Sim ultimately decides to do it, and so Archer is let off the hook. He should have been forced to ultimately make the decision. The writers could have went cliche and written it in where Sim is forced to, or Sim makes the decision ultimately, but we know what Archer's choice would have been. I think it would have added to his character and would have allowed us to judge him against Janeway, Sisko, and Picard when they were in similar circumstances. Another fun thing that I came up with is perhaps to not let the audience know. Have a scene where Sim walks into the sickbay with Phlox and Archer and have him say, "I want us to discuss this one last time. I don't know that I need to die." And then cut to the scene where we see one of the Trips being sent out into space because he died. I think that could have added a lot of mystery. We don't know which way they went or which Trip it is. And at the end of the day, would it matter? This Trip had all of the memories of the other Trip. He had all of the wants, all of the desires. So, is it really the same person or not? At the end of the day, I decided to conclude this episode, even though it is on the edges of the Xindi War, because it had shown how desperate they were and what they were willing to go through. The Enterprise was one ship, a lone ship, with no allies and no help. Well, no allies yet. They had to do everything to survive, to save Earth, and they were willing to do what had to be done. But all of these are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below.